All right, so here is the diagram, right? This is you, the user, okay? And this is the most common pattern of a web or a mobile application. The data is present in the database. There is an API server in front of it, right? It's also sometimes called as middleware. Again, go and check the other courses, especially the Python course, to understand this little bit more details. But for now, you can just follow, right? So there's a database, there's an API server on top of it, right? And then basically, uh, you have like the browser or your mobile from where you basically access this application. And then this application is gonna have the UI loaded on your mobile or on your desktop, right? Browser, right? So let's basically look at how an API looks like, right? So let's go ahead and look at that, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and go to, so now let's look at how an API looks like. So I'm going to go to this link. This link will be provided to you. So notice that this is what it is, right? So essentially the data is returned as JSON, right? And that JSON is basically rendered on your uh, UI, or that's the language with which your UI talks back to the API server. Again, for now, just follow this because this is a UI course with HTML, JS, and CSS. But if you go to the Python course, you'll have more information about this because there we actually build this UI, or rather the API and API server as well. For now, just go ahead and try to go through the motion and understand basically the diagram that I showed you earlier, right? And so what I can do is I can actually show you a little bit of a presentation to understand this a little bit better. Okay. So here we have an application, right? This is the UI loaded on your website, on your browser, or on your, in the mobile app on your mobile, right? Or in the browser, right? And basically what happens is, let's say you want to add a user, right? So you put one John and John's email, right? And what happens is you are basically sending an HTTP post request to this API server, right? Again, this might sound a little bit complicated. In the Python course, we have made it much clearer because there we actually build this, right? But for now, just try to understand from the UI perspective. So the data goes, that gets persisted into the database, right? And then what you can do is then later, let's say you want to search with an ID 1, right? What happens is you send an HTTP GET request and you get the data back from the database to the API server, and then the API server sends it back, and then it is rendered on here, right? So that's basically a web or a RESTful application, right? And this is basically called as a REST API, right? So something you should know, right? So think of it this way, that the UI and the backend is talking with JSON data amongst themselves, right? Now, one example we can see of that is this link, and I'll have this link as part of one of the HTMLs there, just so that you are aware of it. And notice if I go here, it's going to give me all the users. Now, if I say, let's say one, I'm going to only get the user one, right? So that's basically the API that we are going to use to kind of make our application fetch from a real sort of information store or API server, and actually then show it here. Like now here we don't have anything. Like if we say one, right? Sorry, here. If we say one, all it is doing is gonna just go ahead and console it out or just alert it as we saw, right? But what we actually want to happen is for this to go back, bring the information from here, right? And show it, right? So we're gonna do that next, right? So let's go ahead and actually start building that part. Now, before we do that, we always have Gemini to ask things to, right? So what we can do is, let's say, uh, in our table, or you can actually go to the Gemini itself, right? But I'm going to go into AI mode. I'm going to say, hey, you know what? Hey, Gemini, tell me about JSON as if I am novice with a couple of example, right? Because we are dealing with a JSON data here, which is basically key value, key value, key value pairs, and within a curly brace, and then within an array. But Gemini is probably going to do a much better job of explaining that. So let's go to here and notice it says curly rules to contain entire object, square brackets to contain a list or an array, keys and values separated by colon, which is here. And then on the other side of the colon, there is the name, which is key, and Gemini is the value, right? So notice that it is showing an example here. So you have title, author, year published, and so on. And then if you notice here, there's a grocery list, which is also JSON, but within that we have like a list, right? A JSON array, right? Now it is going to give you a lot more examples and information than what I am giving you now. But for now, for the sake of this course, understand that JSON is what is exchanged between the UI and the backend, right? And the JSON looks like this generally, okay? All right, so now you know JSON, right? And it's also the long form of that is JavaScript object notation. All right, so we learned about JSON, JSON arrays. So this is a JSON array, right? And then you can have an array inside of a JSON also, which we saw with the example that Gemini gave us, right? With the grocery list. All right, so and then we also saw like how we can fetch a particular employee alone, right? Like this, users as the array. I can say one and get only one and so on, right? Okay, so now I'm not really gonna go ahead and just write the code completely here, but I'm gonna go ahead and actually paste it and see what happens, right? And then I'm gonna explain the code to you, right? So let's see. So I'm going to go ahead and this code will also be made available to you. So I'm going to go ahead and paste it. I'm going to go ahead and run it. All right. So let's see what's happening here. Okay. So again, we're not changed the UI a lot, right? Nothing really is changed a lot, right? But let's see it working first. So I'm going to say ID search. Notice that we're getting one Leon Graham, which is basically the user from here, right? And then let's say if we try to get some other user, like let's say take any other user, let's say 6, right? User number 6, and then Curtis 7, right? So let's go ahead and into our UI, which is here. Let's say 6 or 7, let's say, or let's try to get Dennis, Mr. Dennis, and then if we get 7, it's gonna be Curtis, right? Fantastic, isn't it? So let's understand what's going on here, right? We know most of the code, right? But we're just trying to kind of put this into a real semi application, okay? All right. So what we're doing here is this is an HTML document, right? Within that, we have header. We are linking to Bootstrap. Earlier, we just took it from the Bootstrap page, but you can take it from here as well. And again, this code will be made part for you, right? Like of the course, right? It will be provided. Now within body, we have this div class container empty4. Like this says margin top of 4. Like we're giving it some margin. Again, this is like a bootstrap class. Don't worry about it. So we are saying is search employee directory, right? So and then we are saying this MB4. We created a form we already know. MB4 is like margin bottom 4. Like we want to have some distance between this and whatever is underneath that one, right? The form. So this, let's say if we remove this one. So for example, I remove this one, right? Uh, and run it. So notice that this comes together. We don't want that. So what we want is to have a gap between when the form ends and the table starts, right? So that's what that is for. Then we have this employee ID, right? And then the input type is text, whatever. We already have learned this. We added this BR, which is basically breaking into this one. We could also use one of the MB classes here, right? But we have added like some break between this employee and this button, right? Employee text and this button. And then we have this button is primary. There are other options as well. We can say info, for example, and then notice the color changes, but I'm going to keep it as that, right? These are different classes. Again, go through the bootstrap, you'll understand more, but the goal here is not to understand every syntax, but to understand the system in general, which should be your goal in the AI era anyways, right? The value is search, so that's good. Then we have our table. This time we said, okay, table is table bordered, right? And then the class, notice here that we have used the table dark so that we make it like a uh, table header, right, to be dark. And then we have the T body. Now here, notice that the T body is empty because initially there are no users, right, that we have fetched, right? So now what we want is for the send data function, which was earlier just alerting and consoling out things, we want to actually fetch some data for it. So that's what we're doing. So what we're doing is we are saying like, hey, employee ID is the value, right, which we earlier had, right? Get element by name we used, but now we can use get element by ID as well. So that's going to be your employee ID, right? And then, so when we enter, uh, so hold on. So for example, when we enter one here, right, and when we click search, the button uh, on click event actually calls this function, and the EMP ID is one now because we have read it from document.getElementID by value. Then basically the API URL is the same API URL that we are trying to like, test here, right? And then basically what happens after that is we are saying, okay, the table's body, because you want to fill that body, we are saying, okay, the ID is user table body, right? Again, this code will be made available to you, right? And now what we are saying is we are fetching the data using a function that is already available to us, and then trying to fill that data in here, right? So let's do that, right? So what we're doing is we are saying, okay, we are fetching API URL employee ID, right? So what we're doing is we are saying, hey, the employee ID is one here, right? So what happens is we are saying like, okay, use this API URL, then add the employee ID to it. So for example, let's say if we search for 7, what we are saying is you add this and search for that, right? So that's what we're doing here. So notice here, the API URL and the employee ID will be concatenated. We are saying the method is going to be get, and then once the response arrives, right, you basically convert that response into JSON, and then what you do is basically split the incoming name into, and this is another JavaScript function, split the name and put the first name and the last name from the splitted names first and the last element, right? Or the first and the second element. Again, if you want to know about arrays, list, and things like that, the concepts are same across languages. So I'd recommend like understanding these concepts on their own as well, right? And you can check out the Python course where we actually go into a little bit more details into lists, and the similar concepts are here as well, right? Anyway, so next up what we're doing is we're saying, okay, the table body's inner HTML, which is the table body here, it doesn't have anything at this point in time. What it needs to have is the data's ID, whatever data came in, the ID of that, which is basically data's ID here, 7 in this case, right? And then what it needs to have is the first name and the last name as we received it, right? And then if there's any error, clear the body of the table and then alert the error message, right? If you can't reach the server or something. So I'm going to go ahead and run it. I'm going to add 1. Notice we get the output. If we say 7, right, we get this. Now, one thing is very interesting. So let's say if I say 6. Now notice it says first name is Mr. and the last name is Dennis, right? This is a little bit interesting because if you search for 6, you see what data is coming out. It is Dennis and then their last name, right? Or Mrs. Dennis and their last name, right? So now the problem is this happened because we always split one, split it and then pick up like the 0th element, which is Mrs. in this case, and the first name, right? And that's why there is an error. So this way you can understand things much better, right? And then you want to see how the data is flowing. So let's go to the console here, right? Something you should know. So I'm going to go ahead and clear this out, and I'm going to search for 1 and search, and now go to the network tab, right? And notice that there is an API request that has gone in, right? And let's see. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what happened here. So we actually made the request to 1, okay, this particular URI URL, right? Which basically, if you see all this data that has gone in, this is an HTTP GET request, which is what we said for our what you can say the code to make, which is somewhere here. Notice here, right? And then we got a response, and the response was this one, right? Which is basically the same response you will get if you do uh, this, right? So this is what it is, right? So this is how you can see the data flowing across your UI and the backend API into the console, right? So yeah, so the application kind of looks nice where we are actually doing the fetch of an actual data from a backend. Isn't it interesting, right? All right, so this completes this particular course and also the lesson. So again, as I said, we have just scratched the surface of HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. But please know, at this point in time, this is more than enough. We should be able to understand most applications that we create throughout the courses on my website and elsewhere. Uh, just knowing these concepts alone in case of HTML, right? JavaScript and CSS. But yes, as I said, these are foundational, kind of important for you to understand other courses, right? The code that is there in the other courses. All right, so I'm requesting you to do some practice before we move forward. And yeah, next up, go ahead and learn the rest of the essential courses, right? Before we move on to the actual like deep courses. So what I'm going to do is little bit summarize what we have done, but before that, I'm going to go ahead and save this file as index.html somewhere. So I'm going to go ahead and say index.html and save this file. And let's do a very quick summary of what all we learned